What's up, guys? I've got a harmonica lesson, but we're going to talk about the circle of fifths today. And this is in preface to the actual lesson that I want to get to. But I'm using the circle of fifths in that lesson, so I thought I better just do like an introduction to it. What I just played was the first 5 notes of the major scale, and I did them in all 12 keys, but I did them in a certain root order, where I was moving up in a perfect fourth every time. So I started. Here we have the circle of fifths, alternately known as the circle of fourths. I started the exercise in the key of C, and then I just started moving counterclockwise around this circle here. So I played C, F, B flat, E flat, right? And so on. Here's the beauty of the circle of fourths or fifths. You always eventually come back to where you started from. And it's a neat way to practice things because there's a feeling of accomplishment. It's like, oh, I'm back at the key of C. That means I've finished. So I like that. I actually prefer to practice things in root movements of a fourth. But I do practice things in fifths also, just to do it, and to stay sharp on that. This particular order of notes, particularly the order of fourths, I feel it's important for a musician to know about this and be able to just play just the root notes. And eventually get to the point where they can do their major scales in that order and do other patterns. There's a minor pattern that I like to do in the order of fourths. And so on. The thing about practice any kind of patterns in fourths is that it helps us when we get to playing actual music. All this is just exercises, right? But there are so many songs, popular old jazz standards, older songs, not so much modern pop music, but sometimes, where the root movement is in fourths, and I'm thinking of songs like All the Things You Are, Autumn Leaves, Fly Me to the Moon, and so on. And it's not like the whole song is moving in fourths, but there'll be like large chunks of it that are, and then they'll do like a change to another key center, and then they'll do the fourths again for a while. Any song where there's the 2-5-1 progression, just be aware that the 2-5-1 progression is something that's moving in fourths. So, like on this whiteboard, in order to draw this circle with my salad bowl, that's what I used, right? Because I'm in my kitchen. This is the jazz kitchen. Do lots of improvisation in here when I cook. Before I drew the circle, there was a 2-5-1 progression from that tritone lesson that I did, right? So the 2-5-1 progression in the key of C is D minor, G7, C major 7, which is, look at this, D, G, C. Now, there are plenty of songs where they keep going, D, G, C, F, and this will be a major chord too, the F, but it just goes to show you root movements of a fourth. It's a good way to practice things, and like I said, so I'd encourage you to like memorize this and also muscle memory it, just doing something like Now, what was that? Whole notes? I don't know. I wasn't necessarily doing it in tempo. Just playing long notes and getting used to that, and then you maybe could speed it up like 2 beats a piece, and then get to the point where, well, it's not any kind of race, because what I want you to do is feel that first. The next thing you could do might be like the first 2 notes of a scale. Back and forth. But let's look at the circle of fifths, and let's talk a little bit of music theory, just because we are comprehensive musicians, right? We're not just harmonica players, we're not just blues players. And let's talk about the circle of fifths. We call the right side of the circle the sharp keys, okay? Sharp keys. And the left side we call the flat keys. And we start at the top with the key of C, 0 sharps, 0 flats. It's neutral. As we move to the right, we add a sharp. So the key of G has 1 sharp. The key of D will have 2 sharps. The key of A will have 3 sharps. E will have 4. Till we get to the bottom, we're dealing with 6 sharps, the key of F sharp. When we move counterclockwise, we add a flat every time we move. So B flat will have 1 flat, or F will have 1 flat, B flat will have 2, E flat will have 3, and so on. And we have the key of G flat at the bottom also. These are in harmonic equivalents. I like to use big words that have a lot of syllables. Anything else I want to say about the circle of fourths? 2 things. Let's talk about the tritone interval. I did the lesson about the tritone substitution, and I told you that the tritone is a kind of a dissonant interval, but there's some kind of funny relationship between the two, right? There's a pivot point between. It's interesting. 3 whole steps, a dissonant interval. You'll look at the note that's directly across any note in the circle of fifths. Like C to F sharp, obviously, it's a tritone. And it goes both ways. F sharp to C is a tritone interval. G to D flat, a tritone. So that's interesting. The other thing that I want to tell you is that sometimes you'll see the circle of fifths notated with other notes. Maybe they'll put them on the inside of the circle, and what these are the relative minor keys. And these are like a interval of a sixth away from each other, but when you look at a piece of sheet music, you may see a piece of sheet music and it has 2 sharps. And you say, oh, I know that's the key of D, but you have to look closely and look at the actual notes, and then you may discern that it's actually in the key of B minor, which is the relative minor. So they share the same key signature. And this is D minor, and this is going to be G minor. So these also move in perfect fifths as you go around, and these move in fourths as you go this way. The relative minor keys. I think that's all that I need to say. I teach my students how to play the chromatic scale. This is a chromatic scale. It's 12 tones, right? Laid out very beautifully like a clock. I teach my students the chromatic scale, but this is the chromatic scale in another order. And I need to get my students to memorize this and muscle memory this and be able to produce this. Fifths and fourths. Okay? Thanks, and thanks to our sponsor also.